You're listening to School Solutions Talk, an exploration into the development of school culture and community through the integration of solution-focused practice. Here are your hosts, Tara Gretton and Vicky Essebag. Thanks to Family-Based Solutions, a charitable organization that aims to end the cycle of abuse in families and to repair relationships using the solution-focused brief therapy method. They offer counseling services, support groups, solution-focused training, online support, and global leadership to those who need it most. Learn more at familybassedsolutions.org. The CCBC provides workplace training programs, coaching, and consulting to organizations across various sectors worldwide, all with solution-focused coaching as the fundamental educational framework. For more, visit pracademia.com. That's pracademia.com.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to School Solutions Talk. This is Vicky Essebag, and hi, Tara.
Hi, Vicky. Good to see you.
And we're very excited to have three special guests with us today. And it's my pleasure and honor to introduce them to you. Professor Rose McCabe from St. George's University of London is a psychologist specialising in professional patient communication in mental health care. She has expertise in developing and implementing solution-focused interventions to improve well-being for young people. Dr. Fiona Robinson, also from St. George's University of London, is a mental health research fellow specialising in research with children, young people, and parents. Her current work focuses on brief solution-focused interventions to promote well-being in school students and staff. Mr. Ben Starkey is assistant principal with oversight of behaviour in a mixed comprehensive all-through school in London, UK. Welcome, all of you.
Yes, welcome everybody.
Thank you.
Have you here. We are, really excited to have you here. We've been really looking forward to this conversation and obviously been following the work that you've been doing in London, and feel really privileged to have an opportunity to ask you lots of questions about it and to be able to kind of share it with our listeners. So initially, just to kind of get us started, I think it would be really useful just to hear a little bit about, maybe from yourself, Ben, about the school, so we get a sense of where it is and the demographic, and also from yourselves, Rose and Fiona, about the university, and maybe about how the study started, how it came about, then we'll ask some more questions after that.
Sure, sounds good. So the school is based in East London near the Olympic Park, so we've got the Olympic legacy. We are an all-through school, so that means we have students from nursery all the way up to sixth form to year 13, of just over 2,000 students. I'm based in the secondary part, so look after the year 7 to 13. From part of my remit is the behaviour side of things. We're just shy of 50% pupil premium, so a high number of students from what's defined as a disadvantaged background, which brings its own funding, but obviously brings its own challenges as well.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Ben. And Rose and Fiona, can you tell us a little bit about how the study started?
So Rose and I are based in the School of Health and Medical Sciences at City St. George's University. So we got some funding from a local charity called the Barts Charity to run a research study. So it's called the Solutions in School Study, or Solis study for short. And the study is about, it involves training school staff to use solution-focused practice in their everyday conversations with students and staff colleagues and with parents. And we're very fortunate that we're piloting it over one school year with the school that Ben works at. The study came about, it was sort of developed over quite a long period of co-design work that we did with the school. So we spoke with a lot of students, with staff and with parents about what their priorities were. Initially, it started out as a kind of how can we embed mental health support in the school? And then over this development work, we sort of decided together that a key priority really fundamentally was about improving communication at school, staff and student communication, staff and parent communication. And then potentially, if we can improve communication and relationships, this then may have a knock-on effect on student behaviour, other factors like attendance, well-being, concentration and motivation to attend school. So really, students and staff spoke to us about how sometimes they perceive that conversations focused on, when things are going wrong, and how that could lead to sanctions and time out of the classroom. And they were really open to this idea of how students could work on being better, and moving towards the future that they want. So, staff also spoke about how time that's spent on behaviour management, can distract them from enjoyment of work, satisfaction, distract them from their teaching responsibilities. So they were quite open to the idea of sort of having different way of conversations with students. And we, in our department at the university, so Rose is leading on to other trials where they're trialling using solution-focused approaches for adults and young people who are in crisis, so in mental health care settings. Or maybe Rose want to speak about this, but I think in those studies, practitioners have reported that it's a much more enjoyable way of working. So we were quite keen to think about how could we bring this to the school environment.
Yeah, so absolutely. And I think another point to add on that would be when you see the kind of young people presenting to or being referred to mental health services needing perhaps more input, I was really interested in the potential impact of introducing these approaches on the school level around supporting wellbeing and mental health, because certainly in the UK anyway, the waiting lists for mental health services, particularly child and adolescent mental health services, are very, very long. And young people, particularly when they're kind of developing and, a school year, many children will wait months and months, even for just initial triage. And then once they're triaged, in mental health services, they'll wait for months and months more for any kind of support or treatment or intervention. So I was very interested in the kind of possibility of just supporting young people much earlier, plus their teachers, plus their families, and also then hopefully diverting further kind of deterioration maybe in mental health for some people. If you can intervene early, I think that's just such an exciting thing to do, and do that at the school level with teachers who are there every day with children, who see them, and you're not relying also on children going for support elsewhere, that there's a lot of embedded support then for wellbeing in school is really exciting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very, very exciting work. And I'm just wondering, since introducing solution-focused practice in the schools, what has it actually looked like in a day-to-day school life with students, staff, classrooms, and families?
Yeah, it was about this time last year we came together and looked at how we could roll it out, and we were quite reflective on what would be the best strategy in ensuring it's embedded within the school as quickly as possible, also as effectively as possible. And we recruited around 10 of us who could drive it from different departments initially, some of the bigger departments, English, Maths and Science in particular, and then from a leadership point of view. And then slowly as the year's gone on, we've scaled it down the school. So we wanted to take our time, walk before we could run, but also ensure that we were driving it from different angles within the school. And once we got to that point of where we were able to start rolling it out to staff at this academic year, we put in some training each half term for staff to help see how it can be used. Initially, we focused on the heads of years and the pastoral team to enable a lot of those conversations the solution-focused conversations took place from the head of years in particular and people who work from a pastoral perspective. That was our first port of call. And then as the year's gone on, we've tried to roll it out into the classroom. And we've come up with a few challenges as the year's gone on about how we can make that effective in the classroom, especially when you've got 30 other students in front of you. What do those conversations look like? But it's been rolled out as the year's gone on, drip fed into the classrooms so that staff feel empowered to use it when the situation is right to use it. And Fiona and Rose both mentioned a far more positive environment, and I definitely think that's the key thing that you notice around the school, the conversations between staff and students, the interactions that you see taking place day to day are far more positive than they were a year or so ago, for sure.
Yeah. Wow, that's really wonderful to hear. And you kind of just sort of partly answered a question I was about to ask you, actually, Ben. But I mean, and picking up on some really key things that were said around the sort of description of the work together with the school around that co-development. Absolutely love that, how you developed it together, and that really focusing on improving communication and relationships, which, you know, things that are really, really Vicky and I are particularly passionate about relationships within the school environment. Ben, I'm really curious to know I don't know whether you knew about solution focused before this study started, but I'm just really keen to know what was the response when people were sort of initially, when teaching staff and school communities, how did they respond to it?
Look, no, I didn't. 18 months ago, I was told about this because we were doing some solution-focused work in primary. Look, I'm from a PE teaching background, and generally speaking, I'm very lucky in the sense that if I tell a kid to do something, they're going to do it. Head of behaviour, they're going to react. But I recognise that isn't the same for everyone, and we had to come up with some solutions to empower staff to be able to want to rectify this and come up with solutions themselves and build relationships themselves. But it was difficult. It has been difficult to try and change people's ways and the way they do things, especially for staff who have been doing it a long time. You know, as I say, this is over 20 years of doing it. So from my point of view, it was hard to come away from what I know and what's always worked for me to try to do something differently. But then the moment you're doing it and the moment you see it working and the moment you see the students are making those decisions for themselves, which can only have a more positive effect down the line than me making that decision for them and taking that autonomy away for them, is the moment you go, right, actually, yeah, well, this is a no-brainer. This works and we need to drive this forward. And we've made it happen. So we use this alongside another strategy called Chop 'em Expect. So we pick up an area which we want to improve. So our very first Chop 'em Expect, our school's called Chop 'em. I think we can use that school name. But the students went through a phase of not wanting to wear their blazers. So what we wanted to do is train the students to understand why they needed to wear their blazers, why it was important, why we had that rule in place. So there was a period of training, and then after the period of training came the sanction. But during that period of training, it was important that staff had the solution-focused conversation around why that blazer wasn't being worn, what was expected of them, and how that's going to change future behaviours. And within a week of that training, the students were wearing their blazers. And as the year's gone on, one of the most recent ones we've done is around a positive start to lessons. So as the year's gone on, it was outside of lessons initially. So we're not wearing their coats inside a building, wearing blazers, as I've mentioned, being on time to lessons. But as the year's gone on, it's gone into the classroom. A recent one is a positive start to lessons. So students are expected to have a positive start to lessons. There's a set of rules that they need to follow when they come into the classroom, how we want them to start. It's teaching them why we want that, but then when they're getting it wrong, it's having that solution-focused conversations to how they're going to rectify that going forward. And that's what's been powerful, and that's what's brought staff on board, I think.
Wonderful. I'm really interested in what you said about sometimes it's difficult to get through to the staff, and you want to make changes and you're really positive about it, but you're not always getting the response from the staff that you would like to be getting. And I guess my question is, and maybe to Rose, to ask, how can you give us an idea of how the staff training took place and who might have been involved in that and how it was laid out for them?
Yeah. And I guess that's something, well, first of all, as Ben mentioned, we started out with a group. Was there 10 of us, Ben, this time
Yeah,
last year?
around 10, yeah.
It was very
10.
exciting because you all came out of school for 2
We
whole
did.
days. Do you remember it? That was
I
very
did,
exciting.
enjoyed that.
Yeah.
So being able to also give teachers the room to do some like proper training off-site was really important, but is also logistically really difficult. And that's why kind of where Ben's skills came in then as a kind of a master of logistics, because looking at then how we were going to roll out the training and what that would look like with all the staff in the secondary school. How many staff are there, Ben, in secondary around?
Teaching wise, around 80 to 90 teaching wise, and then of course 150, give or take.
So
Yeah, so I totaled it up recently. We've trained 240 staff in total across primary and secondary. Yeah.
Wow.
Incredible.
So there you go. So that's the first kind of first issue. So we spent some time then planning with Ben, as Ben mentioned. There was some kind of senior leadership team, some departmental kind of heads, or so thinking about the different angles we would think about how we would train people. So we did first of all in-depth training with those group of 10-ish staff. And then we looked at what are called inset days, which are like training days in schools, or you'll do other things in them as well, but that's partly for training. So they're protected time. And you have those how many times a year, Ben?
We have 5.
5. So we're very, very precious inset days. So we managed to get some training on the first inset day in the school year. And then we planned to have, we had further training sessions throughout the year, about every
Half term.
so every 6 weeks or so. So where we then followed up with further training sessions. And it was very responsive to what the staff wanted to focus on in those sessions. Isn't that right, Fiona? So
Yeah, I was going to say that. I think that's maybe been the key to keeping the training going and helping it being when, if there's been any kind of pushback from staff is making sure that it's responsive to what they've told us they want. And also we've spoken to a lot of students. So, what students have told us they want and then feeding that back to staff. So a kind of example of that is that one thing that the staff have really liked is they've really wanted sort of practical tips. Tara, we've spoken before about quick wins for staff. So they wanted some conversation stems that they could use in classrooms or in quick conversations with individual students. So we came up with this one around instead of why, try. Which they seem to like. So, instead of saying, why are you late for school today? Why have you not done your homework? Why are you not wearing your blazer? We gave them conversation stems that were, using what questions or how questions, or even though, it's tricky to focus right now, what could we do differently to have a better end to this lesson? And so we translated them into a further training for staff. And then we also made some posters that have been displayed in staff areas. And I've just been doing some additional training for some staff who didn't receive that initial intensive training. And it was really nice because this training I've just done was made up of wider staff like the reception staff, the administrators, the library staff, the heads of sixth form, who I hadn't met before. And they really sort of got on board with this concept of not asking why questions and trying out a different way. And I had some feedback from them that they've tried that in the morning, the reception staff and the heads of sixth form, when students have come in late, instead of saying, why are you late today? They've asked them a different question. And the feedback is that actually they could see how powerful that was in sort of helping bringing the students' guard down, making them more open, more responsive, letting them get on with their day in a better way. But also for the staff have told me that, their day was more calm, more peaceful, and they felt better as they went about their day. So I think if they're able to do something, a small little change, that can have a big ripple effect. And that's maybe the power of it, that they can then, take that forward in their work.
Yeah, you mentioned the connection phase there as well. You can't underestimate how important it is to start with a nice hello, how are you today, before going straight in, why are you late? And that connection is so important.
Yeah.
Yeah, we talked a lot about connection before correction, which obviously
Yeah.
in wider literature as well, but that was quite an important element. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's wonderful to hear. And I think you said ripple effect, Fiona, and as you were talking, I was kind of visualizing that ripple effect, across the whole school. And Ben, I think you sort of alluded to that as well, the difference over the year, the momentum, and that noticing, we're obsessed with interactions in the solution focused approach, and the importance of the tiny everyday interactions and the difference, the cumulative effect that can make and create, the difference it can create in terms of a climate within a school environment. So it would be really lovely to hear about some particular moments or examples. You've shared some with us already, but any more that really highlight the difference on a big...
Yeah, definitely. The penny drop moment for me was that, and this will stand out for me forever, was a young boy. He didn't want to go to his maths lesson. He was struggling. He was like, I don't want to go to maths. I just know I'm going to get removed from the lesson, get kicked out of the lesson. And straight away, this is like a month after the training, if that, a week or so after the training. And straight away, the conversation went to, right, so tell me about yourself on a good day in maths. And he starts to tell me all the things that you're doing on a good day in maths. And we go through the process. We haven't got time to talk about that whole process, but we go through the process, and he takes himself off into the maths lesson. The challenge was to get a values point, a positive point, and he goes into that lesson, he gets a positive point. Now, the old version of me, if it was me 18 months, 2 years ago, and I told that boy to go into the classroom, he would have done it because he would have listened to me, but he wouldn't have had a positive lesson. He may well have got kicked out. He would have just done what he was told to do because it was me. But as it happened, he stayed in that lesson, had a really positive lesson. I then saw him a day later and asked him about his maths lesson. He said, yes, so it went really, really well. He said, I felt the same with my English lesson earlier on today, but I just remembered the conversation we had, and I tried to focus on the positive, and I took myself into English lesson. I had a really good English lesson. And that's the standout one for me, because that was, as I say, the penny drop moment where I thought, wow, this could change. If these conversations are taking place everywhere around the school, this could change a lot. And more recently, not so much from a behaviour perspective, it was a girl with exams, and I caught her round the corridors after her speaking exam, and she was in tears, and she came up to my office and explained what was going on. And rather than it's okay, it'll be fine, it's kind of like we looked at what she had done well in the build up to exams, what went well with the presentation, how can she affect the next 75%, because the exam was only worth 25%. So it was more, again, it was just more of a looking forward conversation, which helped her. And again, I saw her just before she was going into her exam the other day, her English exam, and she said things have been good. And, so there's a couple of examples there. And then from a parent's perspective, I'm hearing it from my head of years that we're in head of year meetings, and generally speaking, if a parent's coming in to meet head of year, is generally not for a good thing. And the language they're now using is, look, I appreciate things are tricky now. I completely understand this is a difficult time for this. Or I heard you mention on your first episode of your podcast about how just getting the guard down for the parents, letting their guard down. Like, what would you like to see happen? And that's the language they're using now. So it's good. And we're even at a point where if it's not a solution-focused conversation, we're calling each other out on it around the school. And that wasn't very solution-focused, was it? So we're definitely getting there.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Those are just incredible examples. I just want to pick up on one tiny thing. Sorry, I'm excited about all the things that you're sharing. But I think that story, all of them, wonderful. But the one about the young person where you kind of put it back to her and asked her she'd done in the past. I mean, if we're having conversations with students about enabling them to notice themselves, what they've done in the past, what they can do for them, rather than us trying to fix it, even though well-intended, telling them that everything will be okay. That the potential for their futures that leaving school, that they're going to be equipped with their own ways of coping and managing in the complexities of life is just, very exciting. Wonderful.
Yeah, and I know Fiona and Rose and Tara, who's not this Tara, another Tara, who they get around doing a lot of lesson observations. So Fiona, you might be able to feed back on some of the things you're seeing day to day, because these are longer conversations, but in the classroom, they can't be as long as they want them to be, because there's a lesson going on. So, you know, it's creating that positive environment in the classroom. So, Fiona, Rose, I don't know if there's anything that stands out for you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, my standout moment's actually not from the classroom. Mine is so as part of this work, Rose and I have been running group coaching sessions with it started out with some girls who are in the secondary phase who they've been referred to us because the teachers' best hopes were that their attendance would improve at school. And so we have been running some solution focused sessions with them. And as part of one of them, I did the folded paper exercise that I learned from you, Tara, that I think that you learned from Ursula Bullman, where you fold the piece of paper over 4 times and you invite the person to notice what their hopes are, like moving forwards, and what they're already doing that works. And I did this as a silent exercise with the girls. And then there were times during these coaching sessions where I was maybe questioning myself, you know, perhaps had it been, how useful were they for them? But then when we had our last session with the girls, I had a couple of the girls come up to me voluntarily and mention that exercise to me, and saying that they kept that piece of paper, you know, in their blazer or in their pencil case, as like a reminder of what they want to achieve in future. And, you know, as a reminder that they can do good things and that there are things that are going well in their life. So I think for me, that was like, it was really touching to know that, you know, perhaps we had sowed some seeds that they can then come back to in future. And a reminder that even if, you know, things aren't necessarily, you're feeling maybe a bit stuck at the time, that there are things that may come to fruition for them in the future. So that was my standout moment.
Yeah, I love that activity. And I think what it points to is that it is so much about the conversation that we have, the solution-focused conversation that we have, but it's also about how we walk away from it and how we process that conversation over time, and the impact and the difference that it makes. And so these girls, by putting that in their pocket, keeping it, thinking about it over time after that interaction with you, I think that makes a huge difference. And what a message that is as well to teachers, that, you know, sometimes we think we're not making a difference in the conversations that we're having or in the lessons that we're putting forth. But students walk away and they process, and it stays with them. So I just love that, Fiona. I'm wondering if there are any other examples that you might have, Rose?
So, I mean, one of the things that Ben was quite clear with us about was, because when we went into the training, first of all, we were very focused on individual conversations. That maybe we were thinking, oh, you'd have more time. But Ben was very clear that we really need to think about whole classes, 60-second, 30-second interactions, you know, very brief interactions. So, I guess that was a real, so thinking about the classroom situation and thinking about relationships was really interesting. So the way that we ran the training was using a solution-focused approach. So we did a lot of scaling with the staff. So they're the experts on like being in the classroom, doing what they do. We're not teachers. So one of the really nice suggestions that came up from the dealing with the whole class situation in terms of maintaining the relationship was, if a child is not staying on task or needs to, in the whole class in lesson, often then that might lead to an on-call, which is either somebody else like a year ahead or somebody like Ben might have to come along and try and deal with that situation. So immediately kind of you're escalating the situation to another member of staff, a more senior member of staff in the system. So one of the suggestions that came up, and I've seen happening quite a lot, is you ask the person who comes on call to go into the classroom, and the teacher steps outside with the student to talk about what happened and get them back on track and reset and go back in and maintain that kind of relationship with them, and kind of and that they are the one who deals with the situation rather than escalating it to somebody else. So the person who comes on call, like Ben, would go into the classroom for a few minutes, or 60 seconds, 2 minutes, whatever. Teacher steps out with the student and tries to help them get back on track. What do you need to get back on track in the classroom to come back in, have a good rest of the lesson, rather than focusing on what you did wrong. So I've seen that happening quite a lot, Ben. I don't know if you've seen that.
Yeah, the moment you said that, I was delighted. Again, that's one of my favourite things to happen out of this, because it's empowering the teachers to take responsibility for their classroom, and they're doing that, and they want to do that as well. To walk along to a classroom and say, "Sir, would you mind standing in here while I go and speak to this student outside?" It's great, and it's exactly what we want. And it's the language used in the classroom as well.
Yeah.
Like we double underline in red, and rather than picking a student saying, "Why haven't you underlined that in red?" You walk around the room and you say, you tap on their book, and I love how you've double underlined that in red. They haven't yet done that, but it's using that positive language to do that, rather than "Why haven't you done it?"
Yeah.
You know, and it's just changing those mindsets, those small tweaks to behaviours in the classroom all add up. Is those marginal gains that we hear a lot about. And they all really do add up to create a more positive atmosphere in the classroom. Look, it's not perfect. There's still a lot of room, as I say. When you're 50% pupil premium, it does bring a lot of challenges. But you know, if I look at, you know, from a statistical point of view, we're down around 75% in terms of suspensions for persistent disruptive behaviour year on year. And so, you know, that's a huge decrease. And that's through the combination of the solution-focused work that we're doing, the combination with the use of class charts and the job and expect that I mentioned earlier, all form part of this triangulation and help contribute to that calmer environment. And ultimately, it's coming out of that circle that, you know, Rose just mentioned. Once a student is removed from lessons and I go and collect them and I take them away, and that's more learning missed, and they go back into the classroom the next lesson and they don't know what they've missed out on, and then it's kind of like, well, I don't know what's going on here, I'm going to misbehave, so you get removed again. And eventually, you know, as we go through, if that's happening less and less, which it is, then that in turn will improve outcomes for students further down the line.
Thanks to our sponsor, Work Collaborative, a not-for-profit movement that helps schools lead change from within. They trust that teachers, leaders, parents, and students have the capability to solve their own challenges when given the right support. Join this global movement of educators at workcollaborative.com.
Just kind of connecting to what you're saying, I kind of really curious to hear about, and this I think was kind of mentioned in the beginning, about that actually for practitioners, I know for solution-focused practitioners, working in a solution-focused way makes a real difference to them as a practitioner and actually their well-being. And so I'm really curious to hear, have you noticed anything about the sort of different solution-focused practice makes to staff and their experience of teaching and their well-being?
Yeah, I mean, look, we do a staff survey regularly, and when staff surveys talk about behaviour, they're asked a question, what do you think about behaviour in a school? And it was resoundingly positive. I think there was only one teacher that said otherwise. I think maybe not even that, which again is an improvement year on year. And I mean, we see in the news that the teacher wellbeing, most of the teacher wellbeing is down to student behaviour, and if student behaviour is in a positive direction, that has an effect on their wellbeing. One of my remits in the school is overseeing cover as well, and again, year on year, I don't have any statistics on that, but the eye test says year on year that there has been less staff absence for illness year on year, which again points towards what you're suggesting there. Rose, Fiona, I don't know if any of your conversations with staff have pointed towards that.
So I was just going to mention that because this is a research study, so we're also running a research evaluation as part of that. And because we've run it over one school year, and obviously we're in end of May now, so we're coming up to the sort of end of the school year. So we're going to be doing our sort of end of year interviews with staff. So that's something where, you know, we should hopefully have some more findings on. And we've been doing questionnaires with staff as well as students over this one academic year. And because we were really keen to not just look at student outcomes. So we're getting staff to complete, we've asked them to complete questionnaires about, you know, their job satisfaction, their sense of efficacy in and outside the classroom, their capacity for solution building. We don't have the results in yet, but, you know, hopefully by the end of this year, we will have something positive to say, and then sort of topped up with the interviews that we're going to be doing with staff over the summer term. I think that's something we'll definitely explore.
Very exciting.
Yeah, from individual conversations, I would also say, and I don't think this necessarily comes up in a group conversation in school, Ben, but a lot of the teachers have mentioned taking it outside of school into their lives more generally. So for things like at home, or if many of them are parents, and obviously it's really interesting from a parent's perspective as well. So I think that's something that staff have mentioned more kind of in one-to-one conversations rather than in the whole, because obviously when we do training, there's 80 staff in a big room, and there's very different levels of seniority, you know, the most junior staff to the, you know, the executive principal and the senior leadership team. And you know, there'll be different dynamics in the room around what people will share in those settings. So I think that's, and interestingly, we did one solution focused session with staff on wellbeing, didn't we? So we just used a scaling approach, saying if 10 was the best this school could be around supporting teacher wellbeing, and 0 was is the opposite, where are we now? And the usual, why not lower, and how could we go 1 point up? And that's something that generated a lot of some discussions as well, Ben, internally around teacher wellbeing, didn't it?
Yeah, it did.
Yeah. So yeah, it's such a versatile approach, I guess, in terms of
It's definitely improved my well-being, that's for sure.
Can you tell us a little bit about your communication with parents and any training that you may have done with them?
Stuff on parent communication last week, and they gave me a lot of scenarios of things that come up, you know, around sort of how to like de-escalate parent conversations and meetings with parents, you know, potentially when you know there's an issue, a specific issue in mind. And so I, you know, every week when I come back for more training, I say, have you tried out any of the solution focused techniques this week? And how have you got on? And again, I had some feedback from the heads of years that they've been starting out their parent meetings with, so sort of setting the intention before they went to the meeting, and, you know, bringing to mind something positive about the student, even if there's an issue they need to talk about. Something they like about the student, something that the student's good at, and bringing that to start the meeting with that, and how they just found that as a really simple but effective way of opening the conversation. And you know, they were saying that before, some of the conversations with parents could be perhaps defensive, and they just starting with something positive can really just sort of de-escalate that and just open up a whole different type of conversation where you're thinking more sort of collaboratively about, you know, we both want what's best for the child, and how can we work towards the outcome that everyone wants. So yeah, just something simple like that, and again, the ripple effect that has.
Yeah, I would probably just add to that around the context of maybe parental complaints as well. So taking this approach where, you know, a parent has escalated a complaint maybe against the school, and obviously things are kind of getting a little bit more, you know, the stakes are higher. So thinking about, so I've been involved in a couple of meetings where taking this approach has really helped the conversation move forward, rather than getting into a kind of like a defensive conversation about what went wrong and why and whose fault it was. It's like, how can you move on from this, and what difference would it make, and what would be the first signs of that, and who would notice, and what difference would it make? So it just brings brings the whole tone into a very different space, I would say, in that context with parents.
Yeah. Well, and I think that it definitely empowers parents to not to be thinking about the problem, but to be thinking about the absence of the problem and what is working and
Yeah.
all of the wonderful attributes that their children have, because it's very easy for parents to become immersed in that problem talk, isn't it?
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
they're living these challenges every day and they struggle. So that's wonderful.
And also if you using the scale, so saying, like, well, if 10 is the best it could be, 0 is the worst, where is it now at school for you and your child? And they might surprise you and say, well, it's 5 or it's a 6. And you say, well, so what is going well? Why is it not lower? And then immediately then that reframes the parental perspective as well around, things that are actually the school is doing well, but otherwise would never come out in the conversation. Yeah.
And it's mad, isn't it? Our instinct, our kind of norm is to think we go into these things assuming that we must talk about the problem and we need to ask the why. Solution focused is such a wonderful paradigm shift, isn't it? It's exciting. And it's not until, as you describe, as you ask those questions and people are like, actually, there are some things that are going well here.
Could be quite surprising to them as well to everybody in the room.
Yeah, which is just wonderful.
Yeah.
It's about some hope, doesn't it?
Yeah.
There's we're kind of moving towards the end of our questions, and yet I feel like we're going to have a part 2, a part 3.
Yes. There's so much to this.
I think what you're sharing is so wonderful to hear and really exciting. And we'd love to kind of know about looking ahead and what your hopes are from this work and within your own school, but actually outside of that as well, what's possible. And perhaps alongside that, what you would want to kind of end our conversation on today. What would be your key kind of reflection or something that you would want to share with our listeners that would be really important for them to take away from this conversation today? That was a good question.
Yeah, I think for me, it's about being open-minded. The more we've gone on, the longer we've gone on, the more I've realised how flexible it can be. I've gone from thinking that this is a 1-to-1, you need 20 minutes 1-to-1 to doing it with doing a scaling exercise with 210 students in an assembly, and it is really flexible. It gives students so much ownership when they're talking about what they're going to do, not what I'm telling them to do, not what I'm telling what they should be doing, is what they're going to do. And when you say you're going to do something yourself, it's more likely to happen than if someone tells you need to do something. That's the standout thing for me. And that's what I want to keep driving forward. Obviously, as I've mentioned this earlier, we still do need to embed it. There's still pockets where it doesn't happen frequently enough, where there are opportunities for it to happen. But that will take time, and we've got to continue driving it through, and eventually we can get to a point where we're branching out into other schools, either in the local community or within the federation, and that would be great as well.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think that's for us the challenge and the opportunity is the further embedding, I would say, in the school. And I think we've achieved a lot more than we thought we would achieve within
100%.
year.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. And for me, I think Fiona might have something different, but I'm really excited about the idea of and what we hear, because we do so much talking to the students about the kind of power of restorative conversations and resetting. Because what students kind of tell us again and again is one small thing goes wrong with a teacher and they think that teacher hates them and it's kind of holding it against them. The relationship never gets back to a good start. And then it just has this interactional kind of ripple effect through every single interaction with that teacher, then interactions with other in other classes as well. So I think that's something that we're kind of really kind of interested in. That's going to be the focus of our next training session. And Linda Metcalf is over from the States, so she's coming into the school with us to do to look at restorative conversations. And we're going to take students who are in reflection, aren't we, Ben? And we're going to take them over and do some live. We're going to take 30 students over, I think, and do some live SF conversations around how things can be different. So, yeah, I'm really excited about that. And Fiona, I don't know what you're particularly excited about.
Yeah, I guess it's sort of building on what you're saying, but I guess what feels most exciting for me about the future of this work is the potential of it to sort of reshape those everyday interactions. So it's like the small changes and how, we can see over this year how that can then impact in a much bigger way on a culture change, even though that can take some time to embed. But, particularly when we're thinking about schools as really, really busy places and how we don't want to make this a burden for staff. So, but if we think of it as really kind of simple but powerful tools, that the schools can integrate into their existing structures, and they can use it, adapt it to what the school needs, whatever works for them. If we think about them as the experts on this. So therefore, I'm quite excited, about the potential of how we can fit it into those existing school structures, and giving both students and staff the kind of ownership and the agency to take it where they want that suits their own school.
And of course, what we really like to do is produce the evidence around that. So then we can roll it out to more schools. I mean, if we get the evidence behind it, that will be really helpful in terms of thinking like policy and then, money flowing for this kind of work, I guess. And that.
And I believe your plan is to develop manual resources and so on that. So where are we in that stage of development? And can our listeners purchase these materials? Can they access them?
So Fiona, I guess that is a question for us. I know it's on our to-do list. The manual is, I would say, currently still in development. But every time we do and we go into the school, we kind of refine it and update it. And so I think that's a conversation we need to probably come back to you on, if that would be something, Vicky. But we're happy to share resources. People, please get in touch with us, as far as possible. I mean, the solution-focused community is very generous in that respect. So I think sharing the resources widely is always a good thing.
Wonderful.
And I should mention we have a website, which is www.solutiontalkinschools.co.uk. So we do have a link to sort of research publications on there and other resources. So, please visit.
Brilliant.
Thank you. And we do have one last little question. And that is, what would you hope that our listeners can take away from today? Just maybe in a few words.
I think I said it. Yeah, I still stand. Be open-minded. Try it. What could go wrong?
For me, it's the power of a single conversation and the ripple effect that has on that person's then interactions with everybody else, both inside school and outside school, family life, friends, everything.
Yeah, I guess mine would be very, very, very similar to what Rose just said. But also, I guess I'm really keen on the sort of the hope that this gives students and staff in school. So, the power of like a simple conversation and how that can change the course of maybe, a student's experience in school. And ultimately, this is, this project has been about sort of wellbeing. So, about sort of promoting happiness in school and the potential of this to make schools happier places.
Oh, well, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us today. I've absolutely loved that conversation and looking forward to sharing it with everybody. So that's goodbye.
Thank you so much, all of you. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Take care.
Thank you.
Our sponsor, the Instructional Coaching Group, is the global destination for coaching and education, grounded in more than 25 years of research focused on improving teaching, strengthening leadership, and increasing student success. The Instructional Coaching Group partners with schools and systems worldwide to build sustainable coaching practices that support educators and improve outcomes for students. Learn more at instructionalcoaching.com. School Solutions Talk is produced by Tara Gretton and Vicky Essebag. If you like what you hear, please rate, review, and subscribe so that our podcast can reach even more listeners like you. Thanks for downloading.